Welcome back to Inside the Philippines. I'm going to keep the introduction short today because the man whose story you're about to hear would not appreciate me wasting your time. His name is Jürgen Meissner. He's 61 years old. He spent 35 years as a machinist in Dortmund, Germany, precision manufacturing, the kind of work where your hands learn to feel a difference of a fraction of a millimeter. He is not an impulsive man. He is not a naive man. He is not the kind of man you'd expect to find at the center of a story like this one. And yet, Jürgen came to the Philippines with everything he had: a plan, a visa, and enough money to build a real life here. What unfolded over the next 2 years is something I think about differently every time I hear it, because it doesn't fit the shape of the stories we usually tell on this channel. There's no bar, no dating app, no obvious warning sign in the first 5 minutes that you'd clock immediately and think, yes, well, there it is. This one is quieter than that. And honestly, it's more unsettling for it. Here is his story, in his own words. My name is Jürgen Meissner. I am 61 years old. I worked for 35 years at a precision manufacturing plant in Dortmund. Same company, same city, same shift pattern for most of it. I made parts. Specifically, I operated and maintained CNC lathes, producing components for automotive and industrial clients. Tolerances of 20 micrometers, which is, if you don't work in manufacturing, approximately 1/5 the width of a human hair. That is the margin I worked to every day for 35 years. I say this not to be impressive. I say it because it is relevant to understanding how I think, or how I thought. My wife's name was Helga. We were married in 1993. She was a dental receptionist. She liked gardening. She liked detective novels. She did not like my habit of organizing the kitchen cupboards by product category. We had no children. This was not a decision we made together. It was just how it happened, and eventually it stopped being something we discussed. We were a good team, not a dramatic marriage, a functional one. The good kind of functional, where you don't notice how much it holds you together until it isn't there. Helga died on a Tuesday in September 2019. I was at the machine. She was at home. Cardiac arrest. Her heart simply stopped, the doctor told me, without distress, probably without much awareness of what was happening. She was 57 years old. I drove to the hospital when her sister called. By the time I arrived, there was nothing to arrive for. I did not cry at the hospital. I organized. I asked the doctor questions in the correct order: cause, certainty, paperwork, next steps. I drove home. I made a list of who needed to be called. I called them in alphabetical order because that is what I had. My brother Klaus came from Essen, and I made him coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table, and I told him the facts, and he cried, and I handed him a tissue, and felt nothing except a very strong desire for everyone to leave my house. I cried once, 6 weeks later. I had been looking for my winter gloves in the car. We kept a basket in the back seat for various things. And underneath a road atlas, I found one of her gardening gloves. Just one. The left hand. I don't know why that was there. I sat in the driveway for 40 minutes. After that, I was fine again. Or I told myself I was fine, which is a different thing. But I didn't understand the difference at the time. The house became a problem. Not emotionally. I want to be careful how I say this. Not in a way I recognized as emotional. It simply became inefficient. Everything in it was configured for 2 people. The size, the garden, the mortgage that was nearly paid but still running, the heating costs in winter for rooms I wasn't using. I ran the numbers. Selling made sense. So I sold. I received $190,000 for the house after fees, Combined with my pension lump sum, I took early retirement at 60, which I had been eligible to do, and Helga's life insurance, I had approximately $310,000, a little over $340,000 at the exchange rates of early 2021. I put it in a fixed-term savings account, and I sat at the kitchen table, which was now in a rented flat in the same neighborhood, and I made a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet was titled, and I am not making this up, Retirement Location Analysis. Phase 1. I looked at 14 countries. I am German. This is what we do. I watched probably 200 hours of YouTube videos over 4 months. Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, Portugal, Mexico, Colombia. I made columns for healthcare quality, visa stability, cost of living, English language availability, crime statistics, and what I labeled bureaucratic friction, how difficult it was for a foreigner to establish legal residency and conduct basic financial transactions. I eliminated countries one by one based on data. Thailand scored poorly on visa stability. The retirement visa rules had changed several times, and the expat forums were full of anxious people dealing with new requirements. Vietnam, I eliminated partly on visa grounds, and partly because in every video I watched, the streets looked, and I know this sounds irrational, extremely loud. Portugal was beautiful, but the cost of living had increased significantly, and the visa process for non-EU citizens had become complicated. The Philippines kept scoring well. English is everywhere, not as a foreign language people learn in school, but as an actual daily language. The SRRV visa, Special Resident Retirees Visa, was a clear, documented program administered by the Philippine Retirement Authority, requiring a deposit of $20,000 for applicants over 50 that would remain accessible, just held as a compliance guarantee. The cost of living numbers were consistent across multiple independent sources. The forum discussions were mixed, as they always are, but the practical infrastructure was solid. I contacted a visa assistance agency in Manila. I provided my documents. I paid the $20,000 deposit via international transfer. I received my approval paperwork in December 2021. I booked a one-way flight to Cebu for the 3rd of January 2022. I want to be honest about my state of mind when I arrived. I was not excited. I don't experience excitement the way some people seem to. I was satisfied that the plan was sound. I had a list. Accommodation for the first month. A serviced apartment near Ayala Center, Cebu, that I had booked through Airbnb. Then I needed to open a local bank account, register my SIM card, find a longer-term rental, identify a doctor who could handle my annual health checks, and begin exploring the Visayas region for potential property. Not to buy, since foreigners cannot own land here, I had researched this thoroughly, but to identify lease or condominium options. I was not looking for a relationship. I want to be completely clear about this. I had been a widower for 2 years, I was 61 years old, and the idea of navigating a romantic relationship in a foreign country where I spoke no Filipino and understood almost nothing of the culture was not something I had any interest in. I had a plan. The plan did not include a woman named Rosario. The first thing I noticed about Cebu City was the noise. Not bad noise, just constant. Jeepneys with their painted saints and blaring horns, tricycles weaving between gaps that should not physically accommodate a tricycle. Roosters at 4 in the morning, which I had read about on the forums and had dismissed as an exaggeration. It is not an exaggeration. There are so many roosters. The heat I had prepared for intellectually. 32 degrees in January, high humidity, I had checked the climate data. But intellectual preparation and stepping out of Mactan Cebu International Airport are two different things. It was like opening an oven door. a warm, damp oven that smells of diesel and something frying. I later learned it was fish balls from a cart near the terminal exit. I had a grab booked to my apartment near Ayala Center. The driver was named Ronnie. He was 23, spoke excellent English, and spent most of the 40-minute drive telling me about his family in Cebu City and asking if I had eaten. I had not eaten since Frankfurt. He stopped at a 7-Eleven and waited while I bought a Pandasol and a bottle of water because he said I needed to eat something, and I did not have the energy to disagree. That interaction confused me a little. In Germany, a taxi driver asks where you're going and then drives. He doesn't wait while you eat bread. It took me a few weeks to understand that this was simply how people treated each other here, or at least how Ronnie treated people. I am not sure what I made of it at the time. Something between touched and suspicious, which is probably not a flattering thing to admit. The apartment was fine. 15th floor, air conditioning, a view of the city spreading out toward the water. $35,000 a month, about $560, which was more than I wanted to spend long-term but reasonable for a first month while I got my bearings. I unpacked. I made another list. The first 2 weeks were administrative. I registered my SIM at a Globe store in Ayala Mall. I opened a peso account at BDO, Banco de Oro, which required 3 visits because my SRRV paperwork needed to be counter-verified, and the branch manager had not previously processed one, and we had to wait for guidance from the head office. I found a doctor near the capital site who had trained partly in Germany, which was a coincidence that I probably assigned more significance to than it deserved. I was not unhappy. I want to be clear about this. I was not enjoying myself in any obvious way, but I was functioning, which was more than I could say for the last year in Dortmund. The Philippines gave me things to solve. Every day had a task, and the task had steps, and the steps could be completed. That suited me. I had a fixer for the first 3 weeks. A young man named Bobby, who had been recommended on one of the expat Facebook groups. He helped me navigate the BDO situation, found me a reputable money changer near Colin Street, and accompanied me to the notary office at the Cebu City Hall Annex building to have several of my German documents certified for translation. It was at the notary office, on a Thursday morning in mid-January, that I met Rosario. She was sitting 2 seats away from me in the waiting area. Plain plastic chairs, a ceiling fan that moved the warm air around without actually cooling anything, a number ticket system that did not appear to correspond to the order in which people were called. She had a folder of documents on her lap, the brown expandable kind with the elastic band around it, and she was reviewing them with the focused expression of someone who has done this before and knows how the system works. I remember she was wearing a dark blue blouse. She looked, in general, like a person who was here to accomplish something and intended to accomplish it efficiently. I noticed this because it was rare. Most people in the waiting area were doing things on their phones or talking to each other. She was reading her documents. When my number was called, I went to the counter and immediately encountered a problem. One of my translated documents needed an additional apostille stamp that I had not been told about, and the clerk was explaining this to me in English that was perfectly clear, but using terms I did not fully understand in the Philippine bureaucratic context. I was standing there trying to parse what red ribbon meant in this situation when the woman in the blue blouse appeared at my elbow. "She means the document needs DFA authentication," she said. Not to me exactly, but to the space between me and the clerk. "The Department of Foreign Affairs. There is a satellite office in Mandaue. You take the document there first, then come back here." She said this without drama, as a correction of information, not as an offer of help or an attempt to start a conversation. Then she stepped back to her own position in the queue. "I said thank you," she said. "You're welcome, Po." And that was that. Bobby was outside on his phone. I went and found him, and we discussed the DFA problem. As I was explaining it, the woman in the blue blouse came out of the building and walked past us toward the street. I am not entirely sure what made me speak. Maybe it was that she had been useful, and I wanted to confirm the information with someone who knew what they were talking about. "Excuse me," I said. "The office in Mandaue, do you know the hours?" She stopped, gave me the hours, told me also that Thursday afternoons were slow, and Tuesday mornings were busy. I should go Thursday afternoon. I thanked her again. She nodded and continued walking. Bobby looked at me. "You want her number?" he asked. "I want to get the DFA appointment correct," I said. Bobby laughed. I did not understand why at the time. Her name, I found out later, was Rosario, charing to everyone who knew her. I did not find this out that day. That day she was simply a woman who knew how the apostille system worked and had no interest in performing warmth she did not feel. In a country where I was frequently being smiled at by people who wanted something, this registered as unusual. I thought about that for about 30 seconds and then went back to my list. But I did go to the notary office a second time, the following Thursday, when the documents were ready. And she happened to be there again. And this time, when I sat down in the plastic chair, I said hello first. We had coffee the second Thursday at a small place on Osmina Boulevard. Her suggestion, which surprised me, though I tried not to show it. The cafe smelled of burned milk and air conditioning. She ordered black coffee. I ordered the same. We sat across from each other and she asked, without preamble, what had brought me to the Philippines. I told her. The research, the visa, the numbers, the plan. She listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I finished, she said that was a very organized way to make a large decision. I could not tell if she meant it as a compliment or an observation. I think she meant it as an observation. She told me about herself in the same measured way. "Rosario, but everyone calls me Charing," she said. "It's just easier." 44 years old. She worked as a clerk in the Cebu City Assessor's Office, property records and land titles, had done so for 16 years. Her husband had died 4 years earlier. Kidney failure, a slow decline over 18 months. She had a son, Noel, 18, studying accountancy at a university in Cebu on a partial scholarship. Her mother was in Bohol, the island to the southeast. She went home when she could. She did not perform sadness when she mentioned her husband. She stated it the way you state a fact in a report. I recognized this approach. I used it myself. We met for coffee again the following week, and the week after. By the 5th or 6th time I understood that I was looking forward to it, which was information I filed away without examining too closely. She was not what I would have described as conventionally beautiful. Well, she was attractive. I don't want to be dishonest. But what I noticed was something else. She was consistent. Every time I saw her, she was the same person. Same directness, same careful English, same lack of performance. In my first months in Cebu, I had encountered a lot of performance. The constant smiling, the "yes, sir," "no problem, sir," that sometimes meant no, and sometimes meant "I don't know," and very occasionally meant yes. Charing did not do this. If she didn't know something, she said she didn't know. If she disagreed with something, I said she said so, quietly, without drama. I was aware, at some level, that I was 61 years old and recently widowed, and that these qualities were landing differently than they might have at another point in my life. I was also aware that I was not examining this too carefully. Both things were true simultaneously. By March, 2 months after arriving, we had moved from coffee to occasional meals. There was a carinderia near her office, a small open-front place with plastic tables and a handwritten menu where she liked the sinigang na baboy. I ate there enough times that the woman who ran it started bringing me water without me asking. Charing thought this was funny. It was the first time I saw her laugh properly. Not just the polite smile, but actually laugh, and I remember being somewhat startled by it. I met her son, Noel, in late March. We ate at a Mang Inasal near the university. Grilled chicken, unlimited rice. The young man ate an astonishing quantity of both. He was quiet, polite, addressed me as Sir, and seemed genuinely embarrassed by this himself. He was studying hard. His mother talked about his scholarship with a specific kind of pride that was not boastful, just factual. He had earned it. It was real. She was not going to pretend otherwise. I like this about her. I also noted, and I am being precise here because precision is relevant, that at no point in those first 3 months did Charing ask me for anything. Not a gift, not a loan, not help of any kind. She paid for her own coffee. When I paid for dinner, she said thank you without excessive gratitude, and without what I can only describe as the careful note of future obligation that I had observed in some other interactions. I know how this sounds. I know I am describing her absences, things she didn't do, as though they are virtues. And maybe that is already a problem, that I was evaluating her by what she didn't do rather than what she did. But I want to be honest. At the time, it felt like integrity. It felt like evidence. The first request came in early April. We had been talking for about 10 weeks. She mentioned it almost as an aside at the end of a phone call. Her mother, Nanay Coring, had been having pain in her hip for 2 years, worsening, and the public hospital in Tagbilaran had her on a waiting list that could be another year. A private hospital in Cebu could do the surgery much sooner, but the cost was $180,000, about $2,900. She said she was looking into a salary loan from her employer. I asked how long the salary loan would take to arrange. She said probably 6 weeks for approval, and then she would still be short by about $60,000. I said I would cover the full amount. There was a pause. She said that was not necessary. She had not told me to ask for help. She was just explaining the situation. I said I understood that. I said $180,000 was not a difficult amount for me, and her mother was in pain, and the solution existed. So why would we wait 6 weeks? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Thank you, Po," very quietly. I want you to understand something. That money, $180,000, roughly $2,900, was genuinely nothing to me at that point. I had $310,000 sitting in a fixed-term account in Dortmund. My monthly pension was arriving and not being spent. I had the financial profile of someone who could absorb that amount without noticing it. And Nanay Coring did have a bad hip. I met her 2 months later when she was already recovering. Small woman, very devout, rosary beads on the bedside table. She held my hand and said, "God bless you, sir," 4 times in a row, and seemed to mean it each time. This was a real woman, with a real injury and a real surgery that I paid for, and that helped her. I want to be precise about this, because later, when I am telling you what happened after, I don't want you to think it was all fiction from the beginning. Some of it was real. That part was real. The hip operation was in April. In June, Charing told me about the typhoon damage to her family's home in Bohol. The typhoon damage was real. I want to say that clearly. I took the ferry to Bohol in July, and I saw the house myself. The roof on the back section had partially collapsed. The kitchen area was open to the sky, and Nanay Coring, still moving carefully on her recovering hip, was cooking under a sheet of blue tarpaulin that her neighbor had strung up on poles. This was not a fabricated emergency. The damage was there. The tarpaulin was there. The smell of rain-soaked wood was there. The repair cost was $220,000, about $3,500. I transferred it the following week. I am aware of how this chapter of the story sounds from the outside. Hip operation, typhoon damage. Next thing you know, the house fund is gone, and the resort money is gone, and he's sleeping on a bench. I understand why people watching this will be nodding already, saying, yes, yes, classic pattern, I see it. But I need you to understand that from inside the experience, these two things, the mother's surgery and the roof repair, felt completely unlike what came later. They were discrete events with physical evidence. I inspected the hip X-rays. I saw the missing roof. I am a man who worked in quality control for 3 decades. I do not take people's word for things when I can verify them directly. So by the end of July 2022, I had spent $400,000, roughly $6,400, on Charing's family. And I had a girlfriend who had not asked me for either of those things directly, whose mother could now walk without significant pain, and whose family had a roof. And I was living in Cebu in a smaller apartment I'd moved to in May, $22,000 a month, about $350, and my German pension of $1,050 was arriving monthly and barely being touched. My capital account in Dortmund still held well over $290,000. In August, Charing and I took the ferry to Bohol for a long weekend. This was the first time we had traveled anywhere together, and I suppose I understood it as a step. We stayed at a small guest house near Alona Beach in Panglao. Not expensive, $2,800 a night, simple rooms, the sea very close, you could hear it from the bed. She showed me the town where she grew up, a barangay outside Tagbilaran. We ate grilled fish at a Paluto place near the pier where you pick your fish from a bucket, and they cook it for you. She ordered for both of us in Bisaya, and I ate whatever arrived, and it was excellent. The family land was about 20 minutes by tricycle from the town center. 2 lots, maybe 800 square meters total. The repaired family house on one side, a second section with coconut palms, and a concrete perimeter wall that Charing's father had built before he died. This second section was empty. Charing mentioned it in passing, that her father had always planned to build a second house there, for when the children were older. She did not frame this as a proposal. She was just describing the land's history. I was the one who asked about it more directly. She said she didn't know exactly. The land had been in the family title for years. It would be Nanay Coring's eventually, and then hers. I said, what would it cost to build a small house there? A proper one. She said she had no idea. I said, could we find out? I want to be accurate about this sequence because it matters. She did not suggest the house. I did. She was telling me the history of the land, and I was the one who identified a variable and asked what it would cost to act on it. This is the machinist's instinct. See an unused capacity. Calculate whether it can be made productive. It was my idea. I need to say that. We had what I considered a rational conversation about it on the ferry back to Cebu. I knew I could not own land. She knew this too. She worked in the assessor's office. She understood land title law better than most. The house would be in her name, legally. She would be the owner of record. I understood this clearly, and I accepted it. I told myself that this was simply how the Philippine system worked, and it did. This was not a lie, she told me. It was a real legal constraint, and I had known about it since my research phase 18 months earlier. What I did not think carefully enough about was what her name would actually mean in practice if the relationship ended. I had lawyers in Germany. I had a will. I understood legal documents. But I did not consult a Philippine attorney before this decision. I did not verify what recourse, if any, I would have if the arrangement did not work as planned. I told myself there was no need because we were in a relationship and the house was for us to live in together, and the legal formality was just paperwork. And I, of all people, should have known that the paperwork is never just paperwork. We hired a contractor in September, Rodell, Charing's cousin on her father's side, a big, quiet man who had done construction work in Cebu and Bohol for 15 years. He came to the site, walked the perimeter, listened to my specifications, and gave me a written estimate. $3,900,000 for a two-bedroom concrete house with covered veranda, ceramic tile floors, proper drainage, solar water heater. About $62,000. Reasonable. By Philippine provincial standards, actually generous in terms of quality. I negotiated him down slightly, and we settled on $3,750,000, $60,000, with payments tied to construction milestones. Foundation complete, walls complete, roof complete, finishing complete. I insisted on this structure myself. Milestone payments. I had managed enough projects in the factory to know you do not pay ahead of delivery. The first tranche, P750,000, about $12,000, went to Rodell in October 2022 for site preparation and foundation. I transferred it to Charing's account, as she was the named party on the arrangement, and she paid Rodell. I noted this in my own records. Everything documented. The foundation was completed in November. I visited. I stood in the concrete slab and looked at the perimeter and the drainage channels, and they were correct. The measurements were what I had specified. I photographed everything and compared it to the plan. In this period, two further family matters arose. Charing's younger brother, Dodong, needed a gallbladder operation, emergency surgery, P95,000, about $1,500. He was in the hospital in Tagbilaran, and they needed a deposit before they would operate. And Charing's niece, her eldest sister's daughter, had been accepted to a nursing program at a college in Cebu. But the enrollment fee and first semester costs were P60,000, about $960. I paid both. The brother's surgery I don't think about too much because, again, that was a man in a hospital needing an operation, and I confirmed he existed, and he recovered. The niece's college fees I think about more. That one I did not verify. I transferred the money, and I asked no questions. Why? Because by November, I had been here 10 months. I had a girlfriend I trusted. I had a house under construction with a foundation I had personally inspected, and 60,000 felt like a rounding error on a transaction I had already decided was worthwhile. Total spent at end of 2022, approximately $1,525,000, roughly $2,400, plus the original $20,000 SRRV deposit still sitting with the PRA, against a remaining capital base of over $280,000. The numbers still looked manageable. The project was on schedule. In January 2023, walls started going up. I stood in the frame of what would be my house, and I thought, this is working. The system is functioning. The plan is executing. That was January. The walls went up in January and February 2023. I visited the site 3 times during this period, taking the fast ferry from Cebu to Tagbilaran and then a tricycle out to the property. The construction looked correct. The concrete blocks were properly bonded, the rebar was placed at the intervals I had specified, the window openings were where I had drawn them. Rodell was usually on site when I arrived. He was not a man who talked much, which suited me. He would show me what had been done, I would compare it to the plans, I would note any deviations. There were minor ones. We corrected them. By March, the roof structure was going up. The second milestone payment, P125,000, about $18,000, went to Charing's account in February, transferred in from Germany. Third tranche, $125,000 again followed in March when the roof was on. I was, by any external measure, a man who had his construction project broadly under control. It was around this time that the resort idea appeared. Charing raised it on a Sunday evening. We were eating on the veranda of the family house. Nane Koring had made chicken adobo, the way she always made it, very dark, very sour, with bay leaves, and Charing was describing the area near Anda, on the eastern side of Bohol, where a relative of hers had a beachfront property that was becoming available to lease. The previous tenant had been operating small tourist cottages before COVID, she said. The tourism was coming back now. The dive sites around Anda were good. A German had actually been asking about the area on an expat Facebook group she had seen. She was not proposing anything. She was describing a situation. This is important to understand about how Charing operated. She rarely proposed things directly. She presented information and let me arrive at the conclusion. I do not know, even now, how conscious this was. I think about it sometimes and I cannot decide. I asked about the lease terms. She said she could find out. I asked about the infrastructure at the site. She said there were already 4 small cottages, a basic kitchen area, and a storage room for dive equipment, though the equipment itself had been sold off by the previous tenant. I went home to Cebu that night, and I built a financial model. This is what I do. I have always done this. Input costs, projected revenue, break-even timeline. I used conservative occupancy assumptions. I told myself 35% average, which for a small 4-cottage operation in a recovering tourist area was achievable. The numbers worked at that occupancy level. They worked comfortably at 45%. The problem, which I can see now with complete clarity and could not see then at all, was that I used Charing's knowledge as my primary data source. She knew Bohol. She knew the tourism patterns, the peak seasons, the competition. I had no independent way to verify her numbers, and I did not seek one. I consulted the model, but not the underlying assumptions, and in manufacturing we have a phrase for this: garbage in, garbage out. I visited the Anda site in April 2023. 4 nipa cottages, weathered but structurally sound, a strip of beach with fine white sand. Visibility in the water you could see 20 meters. It was beautiful. I will say that. Whatever happened afterward, the place itself was genuinely beautiful. The lease was $180,000 per year, about $2,900, held in Charing's name, which was required since I couldn't be a party to a Philippine property lease as a foreign national without additional legal structures neither of us wanted to navigate. The business registration was in her name also. This was, again, the legal reality. I accepted it. Same logic as the house. This is how the system works here. I invested $3,800,000 in total, roughly $61,000, across equipment procurement, renovation of the cottages, generator purchase, dive gear, first year's lease payment, and 6 months of operating reserve. This went in 3 tranches between April and June 2023, all transferred to the business account that had been opened in Charing's name at a BDO branch in Tagbilaran. By this point, I had also transferred the final P750,000 tranche for the house, the finishing payment for tiles, fixtures, electrical, and plumbing completion. So the house was done, or nearly done, and the resort was opening. The resort launched in a limited way in June 2023. 3 of the 4 cottages were operational. Charing had arranged a local dive guide named Efren on a retainer of $15,000 a month. There were bookings. I saw them. A shared calendar that Charing managed, actual names, actual dates. In July, there were 6 occupied cottage nights. In August, 14. September brought the beginnings of the dive season and occupancy improved. Charing sent me income reports monthly. Not elaborate documents, a simple accounting. Money received, expenses paid, net position. The numbers were modest, but positive. I was satisfied. The system was functioning. I also want to tell you, because I am trying to be completely honest, that I was happy during this period. Or something close enough to happy that I couldn't tell the difference, which is the same formulation I used earlier about love, and which I recognize now as a pattern in how I describe things to myself. Close enough. Can't tell the difference. These are the phrases of a man who is not looking too hard. Charing and I spent more time together in Bohol once the house was finished. It was a real house. Good solid construction, ceramic tile floors, the covered veranda I had specified, a view over the coconut palms to a strip of sea in the distance. We ate dinner there most evenings when I was on the island. Nanay Coring would come over, and the three of us would watch Filipino evening news on a second-hand television Charing had bought, and I would understand almost nothing but the weather map, and this felt, strangely, like enough. The construction had gone slightly over budget. Raudal had presented material cost overruns in April, $380,000 extra, about $6,100, which I had paid because the amounts at each stage had seemed reasonable relative to the overall project, so the final house cost was $4,130,000, about $66,000, against an original estimate of $3,150,000, or an 8% overrun on a construction project is not unusual. I had seen worse in Germany. Running total by end of September 2023, I had spent approximately $155,000 in capital. The SRRV deposit of $20,000 remained with the PRA. My German capital account, which had started at $310,000, now held approximately $135,000. Still substantial, still manageable. In October, I asked to see the resort's bank account statements directly. I said it casually, or I tried to. We were drinking San Miguel on the veranda of the house. My house, I still thought of it that way. And I mentioned that I would like to review the financials properly, not just the monthly summary she sent, but the actual account records. Just for my own records. Standard practice. She said she would arrange it. She had never said that before. Every other time I had asked for anything, documents, confirmations, clarifications, she had either provided it or said clearly that she couldn't. This was the first time she used that particular phrase. I will arrange it. I noted it. I did not say anything more that evening, but I noted it, the way you note a measurement that is just slightly outside tolerance. Not enough to stop the line. Enough to check again. She said she would arrange it. That was October. By the first week of November, she had not arranged it. I asked again. She said the branch required her to visit in person, and she had not had time. I said I would come with her. She said that was not necessary. She would go on Saturday. Saturday passed. I did not ask about it Sunday. I asked on Monday. She said the branch had been closed when she arrived. A public holiday she had forgotten. I checked the Philippine holiday calendar for that Saturday. There was no public holiday. I did not say this to her. I wrote it in a document I kept on my laptop. Just a date. Just the discrepancy. The machinist's habit. When something doesn't fit, you write it down and measure again later. I made the decision then to contact the original house contractor myself. Not through Raudal, not through Charing. I went back to the build site on a Tuesday morning and found one of the laborers who had been there from the beginning, a man named Ferdy, who I recognized from my site visits. He still remembered me, the German who checked the rebar spacing. He gave me a phone number for the contractor, a man named Raul, who operated out of Tagbilaran. Raul answered on the third call. He seemed surprised I was calling directly. There was a pause when I explained who I was and what I wanted, a full accounting of materials and payments on the project. He said he would need to check his records. I said I would call back in 2 days. When I called back, Raoul said something that I have replayed many times since. He said, and I am translating from a conversation that was partly in English and partly not, that there had been adjustments to the project payments. That $400,000, roughly $2,200, had been returned to Charing over the course of the build as coordination fees for her role in managing the project. Cash payments. He said he had assumed I knew about this arrangement. I did not know about this arrangement. There was no such arrangement that I had ever discussed, agreed to, or been told about. I sat with this information for 2 days. I did not call Charing. I did not confront anyone. I went through every bank transfer I had made, every receipt I had been given, every invoice from Rodel. The P1,400,000 did not appear anywhere in the documentation I held. It had moved in cash, outside any paper trail I could access. Then I went to the Registrar of Deeds office in Tagbilaran and asked to check the title on the land where my house had been built. The title was in the name of Nanay Coring, not Charing, her mother. I had assumed, I had never actually verified, that the land was registered to Charing and that the house would be in her name by extension. It was not. The land belonged to her mother, who was 71 years old and in fragile health, and after whom it would pass to her children in equal shares, Charing and her 2 siblings. My house, the house I had specified and paid for and visited during construction to check the rebar, was legally an improvement on land I had no relationship with, built for a woman whose name was not even on the title. I sat in the Registrar of Deeds office for a few minutes after this. It was a hot, small room with a ceiling fan and a smell of old paper. A clerk was watching me from behind a counter. I thanked her and left. I called a Philippine lawyer that afternoon. I had found her name on an expat forum months ago and saved it without knowing why. She confirmed what I already understood. I had no legal claim on the house, no recourse against the title, and any civil case against Charing for the missing funds would take years and cost more than I had left to spend. She was not unkind about it. She was precise. I respected that, even then. I contacted the PRA about my SRRV deposit the same week, wanting to understand what I could access. The answer was not good. My annual compliance renewal had lapsed. I had been required to submit proof of PhilHealth registration and a current health insurance policy as part of the renewal, requirements that Charing had been handling on my behalf. She had not submitted the paperwork. My SRRV was flagged for non-compliance. The $20,000 deposit was not seized. It remained technically mine, but accessing it required resolving the compliance issue first, which required a lawyer and a PRA hearing, which required time I did not have and money I was running out of. I confronted Charing on a Thursday evening, in the house I had paid for, on land I could not own, that was titled in her mother's name. I told her what Raoul had said, the P1,400,000, the coordination fees. She did not deny it. She said it was standard practice, that she had coordinated the entire project, that she had driven to the site and managed Rodel and handled supplier relationships, and that this work had value. She said if I had asked, she would have told me. I said I was asking about the resort accounts now, directly. I wanted to sit at a table with the physical bank statements and go through every transaction. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said that I had never trusted her, that this was always the problem, that I treated everything like an audit and not like a relationship, and this was why it had failed, and she would not sit at a table and be interrogated like a criminal when she had given 2 years of her life to trying to make things work. with a man who processed everything like a machine. Her brother, Dodong, the one whose gallbladder I had paid to have removed, came to my apartment twice in the following week. He didn't threaten anything explicit. He just appeared, stood outside. The second time, he had 2 friends with him. No words were exchanged, but I understood the message clearly enough. I stopped transferring money that day. Within 10 days, Charing had stopped answering my calls. I checked my position. Philippine bank account, $340,000, just under $5,400. German account, approximately $8,000 remaining of liquid savings, accessible only via international transfer with fees that would take 3 to 5 days to process. Pension, $1,550 monthly, arriving in Germany, but routing it to the Philippines now felt complicated and slow, and I needed cash today, not in a week. SRRV deposit, frozen pending compliance resolution. My apartment rental in Cebu ran out in 3 weeks. I had a house I could not enter without risking a confrontation with a family I no longer trusted, in a country where I had no legal standing. I had documents and photographs and bank records and absolutely nothing that a Philippine court would resolve in under 3 years. 62 years old. Former machinist. Dortmund. $155,000 spent. 6,000 remaining. I had miscalculated the tolerances. My apartment lease ran out on the 28th of November 2023. I had known this date for weeks. I had not arranged alternative accommodation because I had been spending my remaining energy on phone calls to lawyers, the PRA, my German bank, and the German consulate in Manila. And at a certain point, the logistics of where I would physically sleep became a lower priority than understanding what, if anything, could be recovered. The answer, as it turned out, was not much, and not quickly. The lawyer confirmed what I already suspected. A civil case against Charing for the $400,000 in undisclosed coordination fees would require filing in the Philippine courts, paying filing costs I could not easily afford, waiting for a hearing date that could be a year away, and then winning against a defendant who had no significant documented assets in her own name. The house was on land titled to her mother. The resort lease was in her name, but the lease itself had expired. I later discovered she had not renewed it for the 2nd year, meaning the resort had been operating on an expired agreement, and the bank account associated with it had shown only P280,000 when she finally allowed a partial statement to be reviewed by the lawyer. Of the P3,800,000 I had invested, the visible remainder was P2.80,000. The rest had moved somewhere I could not follow. I moved out of the apartment on the 28th with 1 large bag and my laptop case. I took a bus to Tagbilaran. I could not face staying in Cebu. And I checked into a small guest house near the pier for 4 nights, while I waited for an international transfer to clear. The transfer hit a compliance hold at the Philippine Receiving Bank. A new account, large incoming transfer, flagged for review. Standard procedure, the bank told me, 3 to 5 business days. I sat in the guest house room and I worked the problem. I contacted the German consulate again. They were, as before, polite and clear. Emergency repatriation assistance exists for citizens in genuine distress with no remaining resources. But it is a formal process, takes several days to arrange, and is recorded against you. You repay the cost to the German state. I was not yet at that point. I had cash in my pocket, P18,000, about 290, and a transfer pending. The guest house cost $800 a night. After 4 nights, I had P14,800 left, and the transfer had not cleared. I checked out. I want to describe the next 11 days accurately, because I think the inaccurate version, the dramatic version, would not serve you well. There is a covered waiting area near the Tagbilaran ferry terminal. Concrete benches, overhead shelter, open on the sides, a constant low movement of people arriving and departing. It is not comfortable. It is not dangerous. It is simply a public space that operates 24 hours because ferries run at all hours. I spent 11 nights there. I had my bag, my laptop, my documents, my German passport, and a power bank I charged during the day at a Mercury Drug near the terminal that had a public charging station and did not ask questions. I bought rice meals from a carinderia across from the terminal. P50 for a plate of rice and whatever they had that day, usually pork or fish. I drank water from a refilling station. I was not hungry. I was, by any reasonable measurement, fine, in the physical sense of fine. Functioning, managing variables. I think about those 11 nights sometimes, not with self-pity, but with a kind of professional interest in what the experience revealed. I had spent 35 years in a factory where the work required you to hold the measurement steady, regardless of what else was happening. Noise, heat, fatigue, a bad morning. You hold the tool correctly or you ruin the part. 11 nights on a concrete bench in Tagbilaran required something similar. You manage what you can manage, and you do not catastrophize the rest. On the 5th night, a German expat group on Facebook, I had been a member for months, mostly ignored it, had someone post asking if anyone knew of emergency accommodation in Bohol for a stranded compatriot. I had posted this myself, which cost me something. Not pride exactly, something else. The acknowledgement that the system had failed, and I needed a variable I had not planned for. A man named Werner, 67, retired engineer, living in Dumaguete on Negros Oriental, saw the post. He called me. We spoke for 40 minutes. He had been in the Philippines for 9 years. He did not ask for the details of what had happened. He said he could make reasonable assumptions. And he wired me enough for a hostel room in Tagbilaran and the international bank transfer fee to access my German account properly. The transfer cleared on day 12. I had $8,200 in Germany. I booked a flight. Tagbilaran to Cebu, Cebu to Kuala Lumpur, Kuala Lumpur to Frankfurt. Economy. One way. I flew out in the first week of December 2023. I arrived in Frankfurt with $5,400 and one bag. My brother Klaus picked me up. He did not ask many questions in the car. He is not a man who asks many questions, which is a family trait that I now understand differently than I used to. I rent a flat in Gelsenkirchen now. Small, euros, $650 a month, which my pension covers, just. I have no savings. The SRRV deposit of $20,000 remains technically unresolved. A lawyer is working on it at a cost that will consume most of whatever comes back, if anything comes back. I do not think about the house in Bohol very often. There is no productive thought available on that subject. What I think about, when I allow myself to think about it, is the kitchen table in Dortmund, the spreadsheet, the column headers, the very reasonable, very thorough analysis that ended with the Philippines as the correct answer. The error was not in the Philippines. The error was at the table. I was a man who had just lost his wife and had convinced himself that this was a logistics problem with a solvable output. I had $310,000 and a very good spreadsheet and absolutely no ability to feel what I was actually feeling. So I called the feeling a project, and I ran it like a project, and I trusted documents in a context where documents are only as reliable as the people who produce them. Charing was not simply a villain. I want to say this clearly, because I have had 14 months to think about it, and I believe it is true. She was a woman with a sick mother, a son in university, a small salary, and an opportunity that I presented to her. Whether she planned it from the beginning, or whether it grew incrementally as she understood what was available to her, I don't know. I cannot know. Both possibilities exist, and both say something uncomfortable about her and about me. What I know is this: if you are going to build something in this country, whether a house or a business or a relationship, you need independent legal advice before you move a single peso. Not your partner's legal advice. Yours. A Philippine lawyer who represents only your interests, who reviews every document, who explains what "in her name" actually means in every scenario, including the ones you do not want to think about. And if you are grieving, if you have just lost someone and you are solving the grief with a spreadsheet, give yourself more time at the table before you book the flight. The numbers will still be there. The Philippines will still be there. Take the time to find out what you are actually doing and why. That is what I have. The host returns here to close Jürgen's story and speak directly to you. There is a particular kind of person who comes to the Philippines after a loss and calls it retirement planning. Jürgen is not the first. He will not be the last. And the painful truth that his story reveals is not that the Philippines is dangerous. It is, by most reasonable measures, one of the more viable places in Southeast Asia to build a late-life chapter with all the genuine warmth and complexity that come with it. The painful truth is that grief, when it is not processed, does not disappear. It goes underground, and it shapes decisions without announcing itself. It makes a man efficient when he should be cautious. It makes paperwork feel like safety. If you are watching this because you are planning a move here after a loss, after a divorce, after a life that stopped making sense, we are not here to tell you not to come. We are here to tell you to come with your eyes open, with independent legal counsel, with full understanding of what "foreigners cannot own land" means in every possible scenario. And if the spreadsheet looks suspiciously like the answer to a question you haven't fully asked yourself yet, give it more time. Jürgen is back in Gelsenkirchen. He is fine, in the way that a man with a $650 flat and a monthly pension can be fine. He is working on getting his SRRV deposit back. He does not regret the Philippines. He regrets the kitchen table in Dortmund. That is his story. Thank you for watching Inside the Philippines. If this reached someone who needed it, share it. We'll see you in the next one.